Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sumer Sports Podcast. I'm your host on Wednesdays on the midweek, Parker Fleming. I'm here. We were there yesterday, kind of a long weekend, and we had two shows back to back. So thanks for joining us yesterday with our QB draft and looking at contracts. We're back today, continuing our interview series. I have alongside me co-host and friend Tej Seth back on the podcast with me for the first time since graduating. So congratulations and welcome back, Tej. Nice to have you
Appreciate
here.
it.
Going to be a fun summer, and have along with us as well a really special guest. Sam, I should have done a heat check and 100% gotten the last name correctly beforehand, but I'm going to do it, and we'll just see what happens live. Sam Schwartzstein of Amazon Thursday Night Football. Just a great guest that we have so many things to talk about. We've been already chatting for 10 minutes beforehand with just overflowing with football stuff. So excited to have you here, Sam. Thanks for joining us today.
Excited to be here. Anytime Tage asks me to do something, I'll do it. So Parker, but Tage is a real life friend. We broke bread in Indianapolis together. That's a big deal.
Sam, these are off-air stories, but I've heard legends, so that's great. I certainly agree. When Tej asked me to do something, I'm right along for the ride. So that's great, and I love kind of our data football community just overlapping and growing, and really exciting. There are a couple housekeeping things before we dive into this. Make sure you're subscribed to the show. Make sure that you're liking, sharing on YouTube, telling friends you like about this show. Because it just helps us to grow. It helps us to reach people that want to know about the show. Make sure you check out, we've got some articles coming out on sumersports.com/the zone. Some really good kind of football breakdowns, some higher level stuff. So make sure you check all of that out as well. As for today, not wasting any more time on the intro, trying to keep that under 2.5. Let's go ahead and start to dive in. Sam, you, I think it's not unfair to say that you have one of the more illustrious football backgrounds of anyone that we know. Before we dive into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your current role, and then I'll let Tej kind of take us back into your history as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, guys. Love what you guys do. I'm currently working with Amazon on Thursday Night Football, primarily helping integrate analytics into the broadcast, both the main broadcast as well as one of the bigger projects I work on, which is our Prime Vision broadcast. On Thursday Night Football. So it's giving you an alternative view. We have the all 22 camera angle. We have integrated graphics, and as well as analytics to help drive the story, to ultimately have fans watch football in a unique and different way, as well as make them smarter football fans. That's my personal goal, and that's something that Amazon's given me the freedom to help work with a great team to be able to do that, help build out an analytics platform, make people smarter football fans.
Yeah, no, I mean, everything that you guys did last year was really fun. We talked a lot about the different things that Amazon did. And I think it paid off, seeing you guys go out and win in a sports Emmy for outstanding interactive experience was super, super cool to see, and to see all your hard work pay off and everything. So, I wanted to kind of talk about your background, since, like Parker mentioned, it is one of the more unique and impressive backgrounds in the sports analytics space, especially the football analytics space right now. So you started, kind of playing your football career at Stanford, and you were Andrew Luck's center there, Andrew Luck's roommate, which I think is super cool. And we all know how analytical and how smart Andrew Luck was. And you even won a Rose Bowl at Stanford. And, we were talking about this today. Like, you were the highest rated offensive lineman in the NCAA football 13-14 video games.
Yeah. That's my crowning achievement. Not the Rose Bowl, not first time in 50 years for Stanford, but I was 94 overall, the number one rated offensive lineman in the video game. Barrett Jones. No shade to Barrett Jones, but he won the Outland Trophy the year before, comes back and was only a 93. So the EA Sports people really knew where to value offensive line that year. They really had a good beat on it.
and as a center too, as opposed to, like, you'd think, like, okay, maybe a left tackle is going to be kind of the top of the distribution there, but especially as a center as well, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that was the Eric Fisher year, Kyle Long year. I'm sorry, guys, but I really had to take the crown that year.
Yeah, no, I'm glad it worked out like that, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of discourse about the ratings when the NCAA football video games return here. But so, how do you feel like being at Stanford, playing at such a high level, where you had so much success in college from a player level and a team level, has helped you in the sports analytics space as a whole?
Yeah. So even in high school and middle school, I went to a super great football school. My parents didn't pick up because of football. My parents didn't really know what football was before we moved to Texas. But I grew up in South Lake, Texas. I went to Carroll High School, and that was a big, big football school. So I had probability breakdowns and personnel breakdowns in seventh and eighth grade football. And I'm looking at, and that would help me be able to create an advantage because at that time I was bigger and faster than most kids. But then I also had that keen understanding of understanding football as both from a probability standpoint as well as a schematic standpoint. Then when I get to Stanford, that was the only advantage I had was that I was a student of the game. I was no longer the biggest. I was the smallest offensive lineman on the team, as well as I wasn't one of the fastest offensive linemen out there. And so I found an advantage in understanding, okay, let me learn the game. So let me understand how gap responsibilities, what defense is trying to do, as well as many different analytics to help drive my decision-making process on the field and make it easier for me. So that's where I saw my advantage. I was a backup for the majority of my career. I was third string center for 3 straight years, and I was doing freshman practices. And so then I had to start teaching the freshmen as a junior the game. And so I thought, let's do it from a number standpoint. Let's get people on board to understand that this is just math. This is, geometry on the field. And then let's get some deeper analytics to help us, Stanford, not known for the fastest players, get ahead of that spot, be able to understand a little bit more of the game than our opponents. And so that really set me up. And then I had an internship at a company called Chegg, which was a data-driven company by Dan Rosenzweig. And it was an understanding of how can you use data to help create your product better, create your job better. And that I tried to bring that back into football as I was doing internships there. I'm understanding, okay, here's the next steps that we can take. Here's how I can get an advantage by being a data-driven football team as well as what I was doing in my working life.
Interesting. What are some practical things you think about like playing linemen and because I can sit here and say like, okay, I've looked at spreadsheets have been like the distribution of yards per play is from a draw or a draw from distribution, all that on the field, talking about the geometry, where's a tangible way that you felt like numbers really did give you an advantage as you were kind of conceptualizing the game from a player standpoint?
So I wanted to find out mostly on like the basic way I teach football is there's independent and dependent variables. And the things that will never change is the width of the field and the length of the field and how many players will be on the field. And so while you're manipulating your locations, you have to have in college football, you can't have more than 5 players in the backfield versus the 7 men on the line of scrimmage in the NFL. But where we can put those players, that creates different angles on the field. And so from now I'm having different angle understanding. And now there's math understanding of we did a kill and alert system. So for us, we had a base play that was numbers advantage predicted. Then we had a kill to the next numbers advantage. Third play was another numbers advantage. On the last piece of it is if I'm understanding the goal of each play, success rate, right, using the 50, 70, 100, I now know on certain plays what we have to do, what our goal is. I differed a little bit from Coach Harbaugh. Coach Harbaugh had a great quote. We're going over install. He said, every play is scripted for a touchdown. Look at the playbook. Everyone's drawn up so there's one extra guy, and Stephon or Toby, you have to beat him. Like that was different than the way I looked. It's like, okay, we have a job to stay methodical with it, and so that's why successful plays and success rate was so important to me. Okay, we don't have to win all these different ways, so I'm gaining an advantage. And then lastly, the basics of football analytics is the probabilities. What percent chance are they in this formation? What percent chance are they in this? They are in this personnel grouping, and then when we're in this formation, what should they be in? And so all my prep work was done before the game, so that in the game I was just flow charting. And then once they changed, because we had 2 back set, 2 tight end sets, then I would change and use analytics on the sideline. Okay, here's why I think they're doing it, because I have a baseline understanding from a schematic standpoint combined with what they should be doing. Now they've done something differently. Here's how we're going to approach it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's super interesting that you were kind of ahead of the game from, what we know about just how college football programs use analytics in general. But even this is early 2010s, like very early 2010s, and you were implementing success rate on different formations and personnel into a college football program that a lot of teams now don't even have. But I think the really interesting thing that you brought up there was how Coach Harbaugh mentioned that each play is drawn up for a touchdown, and that goes back to something that Eric Eager, who's usually hosting the show, talks about, where perfectly blocked runs have a higher expected points added or a better success rate than perfectly blocked passes, but you just don't get perfectly blocked runs that often to constitute that. And so, when a coach is drawing up a play and then calling that play in a game, they probably envision it being this perfectly blocked run, and that's why they think it's going to be so successful. And that's why we see runs being called as often as they do.
Yeah, and when you combine that with now RPO games, and you're not asking everyone to win, right? And so when we put everyone condensed into these tight formations and we had everyone block, we now had to say all these players will win blocks. So when we ran gap scheme, it was double teams created. And so now you have a higher percent chance to do it, but you still need to win those blocks versus you do old Bryles type formations, Willie Taggart, spread everyone out, or RPO, we're not asking tight ends to block anybody. Now you're not having those same types of wins, which is the college football game differs from the NFL game where you don't have as many players on roster. You're not going to have a talent advantage in every game. There's things that you can't do that college football allows you to do, which is why you see more homogeneity in terms of scheme from college or NFL offenses.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of the time in college football, you see the numbers suggesting that like maximizing your floor is almost as valuable as trying to go for that touchdown play every time. It's saying, how can we stay on schedule? How can we set guys up to consistently be able to replicate this play as opposed to, being a boom and bust offense? And then there are people who go the exact opposite and say, you look at like the Kiffins of the world, or even like the Arkansas KJ Jefferson offense, where it's like, hey, I'll run 4 unsuccessful plays and then throw a touchdown, and I'll still score a lot when we do that. So it's cool to see kind of like a separating in that, and how a probabilistic thinking of football aligns pretty well with how some people who really know football well think about kind of the possibilities of outcomes and how you should rely on the distribution of runs and passes, or big shot plays and small consistent plays to maximize your outcomes. I want to talk about, Sam, as well. So you got to make some rules and play with the XFL, which is really cool, and really do an applied level of analytics in kind of measuring that. You get that experience, and then you come to Amazon and say, we're going to do this broadcast that's going to kind of change the game entirely. Can you talk to us about how the Amazon broadcast kind of started, what your goals were with it, and kind of the beginning of that process?
Yeah, and we started just having a conversation when Amazon got the rights, and then it was November of 21. I first started talking to them, and they were just looking about how to innovate in the broadcast. And that's what's so beautiful about being at Amazon is it's a tech company first. They're innovative. They want to do things uniquely, and we've been given the green light from the NFL to try and push the game forward, which has been extremely exciting. Where it started, so. It actually started before I ever got there. They were doing Prime Vision with Next Gen Stats already, looking at ways to just expand the game. We'd seen what some people had done. Clipper Vision had been doing things. The Nickelodeon game was doing unique things about how do we make this game more fun, more exciting.
Love Slime Vision, man. That's one of the truly great innovations in football.
SpongeBob and the goalposts. Who didn't when they built the goalposts? They were like, God, SpongeBob would be perfect. And so that I came and I joined it. Then I added an analytical and an insights aspect to the game. So when do analytics matter to fans versus just inundating fans with analytics? When do we put win probability up during a game? How do we explain certain aspects of the game, whether it's with analytics or with schematics? So like, hey, we know that Cliff Kingsbury runs the air raid and they're going up against Dennis Allen and the Saints. Well, how do we differentiate the two? How do you really explain things more in depth? And then ultimately, the all-22 camera angle is one of our biggest features now, so where people can see the whole game, right? And it adds on top of and it's actually uniquely it's an operated camera for our game. So we're trying to frame the game perfectly for it. It's not just borrowing a camera from somebody else. So we're able to now innovate that way. It was a really cool process of growing, of how can we try new things each week. And that was what was great about my time in the XFL was I wanted to innovate and be able to test things and do things before we had to go live on February 8th, 2020. This, we get to innovate each week, and we get to talk to customers, talk to guys, be in DMs, people in my DMs. Hey, what if you did this? What if you did that? And then we could implement it 2-3 weeks down the road. And that's what's the most exciting about this job is like, it's probably the only live beta type version of a product that people get each week in football, right? A lot of teams will come up, hey, here's what we're going to do for this new season, but they don't change week to week. We're the only broadcast that really changes week to week on exactly what the fans will see. And that's been super fun.
Yeah, and you guys really balance well the idea. It's almost like a very professional science lab that's run by a mad scientist, because it's like it looks great and it's interactive. It makes sense. But you're like, oh, y'all are doing some weird stuff, and I think that's awesome that you get to innovate. Like I even think about people like my dad or my high school friends who watch the Thursday night game and they see the routes being tracked on the all 22 with a football or with the pass play, and they're saying like that's just so helpful to have a little bit of an attachment of what I know abstractly, like concretely represented on the field. And it's cool because it is kind of a way to teach people analytical thinking. In a lot of ways, what we're doing with the numbers is just trying to create a concrete map of what you're abstractly taking in during the game. So really cool that you're able to innovate and do that in such a process thing with the full weight of Amazon behind it, being able to do all these cool things. What and you don't have to choose among your babies, but which of the innovations in the Thursday night broadcast do you feel most proud of, or do you think is the coolest, or are you the most excited about right now?
The two things that we did last year that I think were really cool was the first was an open receiver, which concept that we had last year, where if a player had a high % chance of getting a first down at that point of the field, that receiver would light up with a green dot. And so it's telling your eyes on where you could put them or where the quarterback could look. Now it had clear out routes and a few other things that were going, but that now opened it up. We used data and logic to find which players would help convert a first down, not should the quarterback throw there. And that was a cool new way to now we have this all 22, which the one negative is you don't know exactly where to put your eyes on the field. Now we're saying middle of the play, here's where you could put your eyes. And that was really exciting to me. And then it's even better when they throw it to the guy who's green or they throw it to a guy who's covered and they make a great play, because that's why we watch the game, is to watch guys like Patrick Mahomes make big plays, make these great plays. So that was super exciting. The other one was when I got to explain success rate on television and put it in conjunction with completion probability. So we saw that Zach Wilson was 50% completion percentage against the Jaguars, but he had only a 19% success rate. And so it's helping teach people completing the ball is not your only job. It's how are you helping your team's chance of scoring on any play. And so really breaking the game down into not yards, but not and not just completion percentage, but now really are you helping your team's chance of scoring, yes or no? And getting that into that broadcast, as that becomes proliferated, it'll help fans see the game in a different way and see when teams are successful and they're doing the boom and bust type plays. That's still another great strategy. But helping ground people on what if we had a stat that helped understood if teams move the ball down the field methodically, and we actually do have that. Now we're giving that to fans. That was a big win for us.
Yeah, no, that was a great moment. I think I even tweeted when you explained success rate on TV. I was like, I just saw Sam Schwartzstein explain success rate on national television. My life is complete. And like that's all I need to see. And I think it goes back to something that we've talked about a lot, which is where we have so many metrics that we use as football data scientists. The most popular is like EPA, expected points added, but it would be really hard to explain something like that on the show, or even like something like win probability, right? Like that's something that is like a more of a difficult concept to grasp, and you don't want to have a situation where the win probability looks off and people complain about it on Twitter and different stuff like that. So how do you kind of go about balancing like which metrics that you should explain, which metrics that you feel less comfortable about explaining in that little time slot that you get, and the different stuff that goes with that?
So I'll give a little bit of the secret sauce to it. First time I came onto the team, I was like, let's do EPA, let's go big. And they're like, how do you get a fractional point? I was like, well, kind of. Yeah, okay, I got you. Now I won't do that. But the way we kind of approach it is the first thing I want you to do is draw your eyes somewhere because you're watching a football game. And so I gave an example of Christian McCaffrey plays out of the backfield more than any back in the NFL. Okay, now you know to watch for Christian McCaffrey when he's not in the backfield. Then I explain a little bit about why that's important or why that is a concept you want to do, and then or why a team would choose to do that. And then analytically, how does this team perform when this new play or when this new concept happens? So it's still tracking metric, football schematic, and then analytics come in. And so if I have your attention all the way through, you're going to learn some analytics by the end of it and why it's important. But if not, you're still going to be able to watch the game. You're going to see him on the all-22 out of the backfield, and then you're going to know why Coach Shanahan is choosing to do that. And hopefully we get you to learn that analytic. But we have to take you through that process instead of just putting the analytics first.
Yeah, and it's a process that's one of the hardest things is it's you put up a number and someone wants to yell about it, and you have to figure out a way, how do I present this number that has useful information while acknowledging the limitations? While the TV is going in the background and while the game is happening, how do I do all these things together as well? So there's a lot of like craziness and a lot of balancing act in all that. Sam, got a couple questions for you that we want to get into here. Do need to take a quick break and do a little bit of an ad read. Father's Day is coming up. You need gifts for fathers, the men in your life. And I think that what a lot of people do for that is they Google best gifts for a father, and they end up getting their dad another, whiskey stones or a bookcase or a book about old ships or something. And something that I think a lot of people want to use, or a lot of people don't want to talk about, but a lot of people use is something like Manscaped, which has all of your needs for grooming, for hygiene. It's a great gift. The technology's gotten really, really good, and can just help you keep things clean, keep things trim, and is a really good, useful gift. So if you're interested in getting a Father's Day gift that is not boring, that is not something that they have, if any of the men in your life need a little bit of some upgrade in their technology there, you can check out Manscaped, and you can use code SUMER to get a little discount there, which would be always good to keep some money in your pocket. So check that out, Manscaped, code SUMER for all of your grooming needs. Back here with Sam Schwartzstein, talking about Thursday night, talking about the Prime Vision. I think that what's interesting is the slate of games on the Thursday night, because there's kind of jokes about it. Some of them have been just amazing football games in the sense that they're weird. We don't have expectations. There's backup quarterbacks. And so one question I want to ask you about the Thursday night game, how do you think NFL teams are analytically approaching, or even from a roster sense, approaching kind of this quick turnaround, this Thursday night, this short week? And how does that influence the games? Do you guys have a certain strategy for kind of expecting different people playing, or different strategies based on that short time period?
It's something that we've looked at this offseason of understanding, how does the Thursday night game affect the average game in the NFL? And we can't find too much different of an effect, right? A lot of the new features that, I can't talk about here that we're trying to roll out, we say, okay, what does it look like on Thursday night versus another game? On a whole, it's teams treat it very similarly. They actually, you don't get as many padded practices that same week, right? And so there are teams that are in a different mindset coming into our games. Have they had as many collisions coming into the game? And so we're looking at just what the games look like on paper, and not necessarily taking into account too much of what we've seen on researches, the Thursday short week game, how it affects the kind of game planning, right? It looks just like your average NFL game. Anyway, we've tried to slice it. But it is a primetime game, which always leads to interesting storylines, whether it's the Broncos and the Colts, who analytically it would have been better for them to kick field goals the moments they got in field goal territory versus what took place. But that game still went into overtime. That game still had some excitement level to it. It was a game we still talk about to this day, whether it's that kind of game or, Bucks Ravens last year was an extremely exciting back and forth game. Different star players playing up to the potential. That's the nature of primetime games. So it's an exciting game to have, but it's also one of the most interesting because teams do have to have a different approach when they come to a Thursday night game.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think like that's the most interesting thing about Thursday night games, and people complain about them and like sometimes the schedules, but like when there is a standalone NFL game, like there's always storylines to find. And I think like I'm someone who, since I'm a complete sicko when it comes to this stuff, I'm someone that's always okay if there's teams that are like, out of playoff contention playing on these Thursday night games, because when the Sunday slate is happening and there's multiple games going on at a time, you only can watch like the best teams at a certain time, because like that's who you want to focus on. And there's a lot happening, especially in the last hour of the early slate. But these Thursday night games, like the Week 14 one last year, allowed me to watch the Raiders and the Rams for the first time since the beginning of the season, and got to see where those teams were at. We got reminded that Devontae Adams was still one of the best receivers in the NFL. I think he'd kind of fallen under the radar because the Raiders weren't playing a lot of big games, and then we got to see Baker Mayfield drive down the field and have this almost impossible comeback. So I think that's the thing about Thursday night games at the end of the day. But so let's look at some of the interesting ones here. You guys unfortunately don't get my Lions week one. I think that one goes to NBC, I believe. Lions Chiefs to open up the season, but Vikings Eagles week two is really interesting. That'll be the first game on the Amazon broadcast this year. When you look at like where the Eagles are, how do you kind of see their trajectory now that they've given Jalen Hurts an extension, and compared to where the Vikings are at, from the perspective of Kirk Cousins only having 1 year left on his deal, but them trying to kind of add pieces as they do this soft rebuild?
Yeah, this is one of our more exciting games. We're happy to get this one as early as we do. Two offensive powerhouse teams. Everyone kind of had the Eagles as their darlings based on the schedule they were having last year. So they did have one of the easiest roads to the playoffs last year, but then they proved it. They went up against the Chiefs and played an amazing game in that Super Bowl. To get them early is a huge deal for us. Especially with Jalen Hurts signing the contract. If you look at those contract details, especially talking with like Brad Spielberger, it doesn't affect them that much. He's 2% of the cap this year. And so the way they've structured it is they have still a big runway with him, even though he's locked in for a longer time. And so they still have a lot. When you look at the Vikings, they didn't add that much on defense to a defense that struggled. And, the net points was what I used to evaluate whether these are, good matchups or not. And their net points rating was much worse than their win-loss record, right? I think they had 14 wins last year, but they were about 12th in net points. Let me just take a look. They were 14th in net points, right? Mm-hmm. So near the middle of the road in the NFL, even though they had one of the better records. So that's who are they really? Or will they still be these cardiac kids? Looking at Justin Jefferson, and is he going to be able to be bailing out Kirk Cousins? Or is Kirk, playing for another big contract? Kirk is one of the highest earning players in NFL history, So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Especially, I'm so interested to see how Minnesota's defense is able to hold up this year with them using Jordan Addison, first round pick on Jordan Addison, instead of going after maybe some defensive talent they need.
Yeah, it really seemed like. Oh, sorry, Parker. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, some people might say that if you score 100 points, you don't really need to play defense, and that might be a little bit of the Vikings philosophy. Tej, I have another question, but if you wanted to bounce off that, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the Vikings chalked up some of their defensive struggles to who the coordinator was, and getting Brian Flores there, I think will help. But it'll be interesting to see. Flores, we know, was like a heavy blitzing, like to play cover zero type defense, and that was like the complete opposite of the Vikings last year. So it'll be like a Styles makes fight situation when they go out and play the Eagles week 2 on Thursday night.
Yeah, Sam, I want to be sensitive about time, so I'm not going to ask you about line by line about these next couple of games, but I'm going to group the next 3 games that are on Thursday Night Football this year, or just a couple of them. We have week 7, Jaguars Saints, week 11 Bengals Ravens, week 12 Dolphins Jets. So you've got Jaguars, Bengals, Ravens, Dolphins, and I say that because you mentioned Eagles were kind of the darling last year. I think I've seen extremely positive stuff about all 4 of those teams, and I want to use that as an opportunity to ask you about those teams, which I'll do after after you answer this, but what's the process for bidding on those games, getting those games? You talked about net points. Are you doing some kind of matchup desirability ranking, and then Amazon's putting in bids to kind of get which ones they can get on Thursday night? How does that work, as much as you can tell us?
Can't give all the secrets away.
Right.
Right. Coming on later in the year. I'll say this, that we have an awesome team led by Jeff Kaiser, who's doing amazing work to make sure that we have the best slates. I think this is the best Thursday Night Football slate we've seen. And there are a lot of factors that go into it. It is a unique game. It is a different game. But there are a lot. I'll say this: there are a lot of factors that go into picking games. On the games I'm most excited for, number one from a net point standpoint is Bengals Ravens. And as someone who played for Greg Roman, I'm sad to see him no longer with the Ravens. It was one of my favorite offenses. I remember us stealing the pistol offense from Chris Alt at Nevada and seeing it now proliferate, with them, and being one of the only unique teams that Patrick Card, a D lineman playing fullback, like awesome stuff. But now nobody has more weapons on offense. No one has the most darling offensive coordinator in Todd Monken, right, who's been everywhere and done every style. There's no one more set up than Lamar, and he's finally got paid. So I'm excited to see that combined with, I think Joe Burrow, he said something that was very analytically savvy, that where he talked about, on 3rd and 7 in that fringe area, not being afraid of taking a sack, because you're going to punt anyways, right? Extend the play, do unique things. Now, putting his body on the line, not always the best, but I was like, wow, that guy's he doesn't know that it was analytically kind of sound what he talked about right there, and so
Joe Burrow's girlfriend or fiance is a data scientist, so I think that's where he's getting it from.
See, that's a secret weapon. And so I think that's an interesting matchup for me to see, because I want to know what this new look Ravens offense is going to be. Going to Baltimore, divisional matchup. It'll be the second time those two teams play. That'd be huge. And then Black Friday, the first ever Black Friday football game on Thursday or on Prime, 3 p.m. Tua, which I thought another analytically thing, their average depth of target is over 10 yards or over 10 air yards. Like, that's pretty awesome. They're trying to go for a first down every time they pass the ball. They're also one of the quickest throwing teams. Speaking to some of the people on their analytics staff, they're a super exciting team about how they are football first, and then how analytics help guide that process. I think that's going to be a really interesting game, especially because it's the first ever Black Friday game, so it should be really fun.
Yeah, I mean, they all look awesome. I think it's really exciting. And then after that Black Friday game is something new to the NFL this year with the flexing, where I think you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but 4 weeks before a Thursday night game that's occurring between week 13 and week 17, the NFL can choose to replace that with another game that week to put different teams into that primetime situation. So how do you think that's going to affect you and your team? Like, are you guys prepping that far in advance, or is this something that you're going to take week by week for when they choose to flex the game?
Yeah, the beauty of what we're doing this year versus I joined in June last year. Now, I'm working with my producer, Scott Carpin, our team, Prime Vision team. We're talking about all of our games right now. So we'll have a group, and we're going to proceed as business as usual for the entire season. If something's flexed, great, fantastic, right? It's very restrictive on some of the things that they can do, and that's not a lot of what I look after and part of that team that does the scheduling. But we will prepare for the season as business as usual, and then if we have something, it's just like football, sudden change, we will work. But there's 28 days notice for something like that. There are restrictions on certain games that cannot be flexed, so proceeding business as usual.
That makes sense. Yeah, and now that I'm realizing it, I think this stretch that we're going to have here, Parker, between NFL and college football with the Black Friday football, we have the Thanksgiving games, obviously, and then we'll have the college football rivalry week as well. The next day, I think that might be the best stretch of football that we're going to have all year.
Yeah, going to be a great slate of games, and I like the Black Friday game with football, or with the Prime Vision being there. That'll be a lot of fun to have on, and give me an excuse to ignore my relatives during Thanksgiving and dive into some analytics during the game. Yeah, so I think that's so interesting. Just this whole idea of how we can, look at the game and put all this on here. Sam, one question I want to have, kind of a little bit tying the bow here, just looking at our time too. So you've got this broadcast, you're highlighting the receivers, you're putting on numbers, you're explaining these concepts, and that's great. You're doing a balancing of kind of getting new people involved in the analytical part of the game, and then feeding the people who want the analytical part. As someone who's worked, played in football and now works in football, works in analytics, and does the live broadcasting as well. Do you have some advice for fans, however hardcore they might be, about how to think more analytically about how to use the broadcast? Or even potentially just how do you watch a football game without the broadcast to think a little bit more analytically as they're watching and understanding what's going on the field?
Yeah, I think going to understanding that everything before the snap, during the snap, once the ball is put in a player's hands, is intentional, right? There are things, as you might have football guys fighting against analytics, but I'm a football guy. There is numbers being put into every decision a coach is making. Some numbers they like, some numbers they don't. The way I look at it is the analytics are the numbers that you cannot see on the field. You cannot see how much EPA you added on a 7-yard gain on first down. You can't see that. And so people struggle with taking that into account. But no, that's a huge play because you put yourself in a positive situation. And know that every time you're watching the game and you think you get a handle on analytics, something changes. That's the beauty of football, is the game can't be solved. It ebbs and flows over time. And so that's what, I work on the project. It's something I'm passionate about. Prime Vision is so great is because by giving you the all 22 camera angle, by giving you the insights on top of the analytics, you're learning not just that big low number good, big number good, or low number bad, big number bad. You're learning specifically why these numbers affect the game. And then you get to see it in action. And so when you combine all three aspects of it, you're now getting a better understanding. And there are tons of resources if you're looking to learn. When I was building out my rule book, I called Tage, sent it to her DM. I probably talked about 100 different data scientists and journalists to get smell check on everything that I was trying to do. There are so many different people that are willing to help you out in these resources, as well as read The Hidden Game of Numbers. Read The Genius of Desperation by Doug Farrar about the evolution of how different football concepts. This will then give you this backbone of understanding. Now when you're watching something, you're watching with attention, which is the same thing coaches and players are doing before they get in the game.
Yeah, no, I love everything that you said there. I think that there are just so many resources available to people now that for both sides of it, if you want to get in from the film standpoint, like Sean Syed does at Sumer, where he puts out different playbooks and will explain like why this team lined up in a trips formation against the certain defensive look that they got, and he'll show like these playbooks from Mike McDaniel and Kyle Shanahan that really help on that perspective. And then what you just mentioned, those books, Ben Baldwin's art tutorials, like all that stuff on the other side, I think make it so helpful for people to get into football from a data perspective. And I think like what you said is if you're putting in the work, if you're calling all these people, or if you're doing good public work, like I think it really pays off. And I think that's been shown many times, and I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, I before I even got into broadcast or even working at the XFL, I was publishing online on Reddit film breakdowns explaining football, like going from what does green right mean, what is I'd go through a whole play call, I'd go through what each team was doing, just to try and give people an understanding that like there is intention behind it. And like you said, putting out public work, that matters. People will take notice. People will try and find out who you are and then try and give you a job on top of that. So put out things public, put yourself out there, and you will then have more opportunities than those who don't.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. Okay, Sam, I would be remiss, if not criminal, if I didn't make sure on this podcast we asked you about the kickoff and the kickoff rule change and what's going on there. So the NFL changing the rule, anywhere fair catch brings it out to the 25 as a touchback. You know a lot about the kickoffs and particularly about the no contact kickoff. I don't want to misspeak. Did you invent the no contact kickoff that they use in the XFL?
I invented the low impact kickoff. That's the
low impact. Yes, that's it. Low impact. Pardon me.
Low impact. Yeah, and so because you still make contact, it's still football.
Right.
Yeah. So I created the low impact kickoff. It was very funny. The original version of it was Oliver Luck, my boss, had a meeting with Turner Sports. He needed to show them something, so I came up with this thing, and we didn't have enough time for me to create like a PowerPoint deck or anything, and so we used sugar packets. I explained it on sugar packets, what it would be, and it was a way to kind of to create a kickoff that would limit the high velocity impact collisions, and that was the genesis of it, of looking at what do people do on a kickoff, and they start 10 yards apart right now in the NFL and sprint 35 yards and create a collision. So I looked at 99 or almost all kickoffs. The players end up in the same spot once the ball is caught. And so we said, very simply, what if we started the play from there? Because only 1% of kicks are onside kicks, and only 1% of those are surprise onside kicks. So using the election opportunity from the NFL's extra point, where you elect to kick it deep or kick a 1 point from the 15 or go for 2 from the 2, did the same concept. You either elect to kick it deep and start the play from where the ball is caught, or you elect to do an onside kick. Other leagues have done the 4th and 15. I wanted to still have the onside kick because I thought it's a cool play. And so everyone has their own way to do things. I think there's a lot of different options that people can do. Whatever it is, make the game safer and keep the essence of what football is a big deal. I think that is exciting, and whatever leagues choose to do is great for them. I think that the low impact kickoff is a unique example that some other leagues have done as well. The European Football League does it, and it was a fun project to work on. I remember the first time I ever did it. I looked over at my buddy Brian Kilmeade, who had worked on it with me. He looks at me, he says, "What do you think is going to happen?" I said, "I have no idea. I have no idea what this is going to be." And then it turns out it worked, and we were both, high-fiving in golf in the Gulf of Mississippi. So it was a very fun rule. I don't know. I think that they're still looking at all different options. I know that the rule this year is going to be the 25 touchback that we have, or the fair catch touchback that we have in college football already. And so anything to help make the game safer for players, I'm for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I do think that it will make the game safer. I believe that the NFL research department conducted a study and said it should decrease the amount of injuries by decent amount. I mean, I still obviously think that your solution for the kickoffs is the best way to go, and what the NFL will probably get to eventually. They just seem slower to change than college football and obviously these spring leagues with that. But yeah, it is cool to see the evolution of it, where it started many years ago with Greg Schiano having the 4th and 15 or just punt kind of opportunity. John Boyce made a really good YouTube video about how kickoffs are bad and stupid, as he titled it, and then seeing your kickoff, seeing college football do the fair catch, and now the NFL do it. So do you see another one of these more innovative rules from either the XFL or a different league kind of making its way into the NFL eventually?
I think that the beauty of the NFL is that it's never the same game year to year, that it's the only game with patch notes. I'm a big video games fan. And so with the live service video games and patch notes updating, the NFL is the closest thing you have to it in the sports world. It took a long time for the MLB to make changes. So I think there's plenty of different things. I think the Schiano rule is one I thought about heavily. I thought the word kickoff is part of work culture and vernacular. And so what if it should be great to keep the kickoff in the game. But the Schiano rule works when you're trying to think about safety, you're trying to think about do you still add choice to the game, right? My rule has an election versus a choice. I think an unknown. Could you go for it? Could you punt? You could line up in punt formation and still go for it on the 4th and 15. So there's some positives to that. It's not a kickoff. And so I think there's a lot of different rules. I think that there's a lot of creative people thinking about these things, and people are doing unique things. But I think the NFL will change if they want to, or they'll continue doing what they're doing. I think it's the best sport in the world, and the NFL has solved a lot of it. That was the one thing. My final thing on the rules thing is I went line by line through every rule in the 64-page rule book from the NFL. And at the end of it, I realized it's a really good game. And it works. I really don't got to change much. Let me just because Vince had this idea to reimagine the game. I was like, let me just re-engineer it. Let me just tweak some of the things about it, because this is a really good game, and they got good people working there.
Yeah, I actually had that same thought today, where now that Tom Brady owns 1% of the Raiders, someone was talking about how, if Brady ended up playing for the Raiders, like how would that whole situation work? And I'm like, wait, did the Raiders just find a way to get around the cap, like by giving him ownership? Like they don't have to pay him. And then it says like in the rules that if you own the team, you get paid like that percentage of the cap as your cap hit. So Brady would get paid like $50 million as his cap hit if you assume like a $5 billion valuation for the Raiders. I'm like, oh yeah, of course the NFL thought about everything. Like that definitely makes sense. But yeah, I am with you where, both NFL, college football, all these football leagues are very well thought out. And I think that's why, people keep watching them basically.
Yeah, the NFL rulebook has the word "unless" in it, I think 12 or 13 times. And so they have so many rules unless another rule overtakes it. And so they're looking for all the outlier situations that could possibly happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure we haven't even seen, a lot of it. I'm like every year there's something new that pops up that most people, especially even like hardcore people like all of us on here, didn't even know about if you haven't really read the rule book.
Right. Like how many guys know that you can have a tie? Like that's always a funny situation.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from college football, high school football, there's no ties. And then the first tie that happens, there's always interviews in the locker room. Wait, you can tie in football? Like there's always going to be rules that people don't know. And like I wrote rules and I don't know 100% about how to officiate all of them. Like I think a coach to player communication system went out in one of our games. I have a patent on our system or whatever, how it works. And I was like, I don't know how to fix it right now. We just can't slow down. Start waving your arms and signaling, coach.
Yeah. Well, and I love things like, and again, looking at our time, we'll wrap on this. I love things like the XFL this year with Dean Blandino. I thought was doing a great job of like, live just talking through, even where I disagreed, maybe, live talking through, here's the process. I see this motion. I don't have enough evidence to overturn. I think that transparency was great. And I think the NFL has done a good job of, broadcast of having guys on and talking about the rules and talking about the rulings. And the more transparency there could be there, the more explaining people get to learn, and we get less nonsense like the script is written and, the NFL's rigged and all that. So we can, demonstrably show that's not true as well. So I like things like that for sure.
Yeah, the thing you brought up great there was a kind of one of our mantras of our team is if the teams care, we're assuming the fans care as well. And so that's like fourth down decisions. How do we explain it? Sometimes a fan get upset about whether they did or didn't go for it. You'll see every single win probability model online will have some sort of thing about what the decision should have been, right? But our goal is you do not have to agree with the decision. You just need to understand we want to help educate that process. So when people are saying, I don't know why they would. Well, there's always a why. There's always an intention. There's always a thought process. And so we'll give you that information. We'll take you on that journey. You don't have to agree with what I'm saying or what anyone else will say. We just want to help you get to that spot. And that's really what broadcasters really want to do. How do you best service the people who are watching your games?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's Sam Schwartzstein. You can find him on Thursday nights throughout the season on the Amazon broadcast, Thursday Night Football. You can find him on Twitter at SchwartzsteinS with great content there as well. Sam, thanks so much for joining the show today. Really appreciated having you. This is a great conversation. I've written down 4 or 5 things I'm probably going to toss in your DMs as soon as we get off here, but really appreciate you coming on Talking Ball and really looking forward to the broadcast this fall.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah. And anyone who's watching this right now or at any moment, you have an idea for how would you broadcast football differently? My DMs are open. Please let us know. Not everything will go on air, but I'm still learning, still trying to best understand what everyone wants to see and how we can best serve customers and fans. So just please jump into my DMs and let me know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. As someone who jumped into your DMs originally, I can attest to that. It leads to really good things, where we end up doing this. But yeah, really appreciate you coming on today, and I'm glad we got to do this.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. For Tay Chef, I'm Parker Fleming. This has been the Sumer Sports Show. We'll catch all of you next week.